forever.
And me too, and I think that's the best way. And the reason I said it is I want people to be very aware is that with our attitudes and with our thoughts, we can create our own reality.
I agree.
And it's about time that we
all participate constantly in that, correct?
Sure, you betcha. So what we have to do is begin to understand the phenomenon of the power of our minds and begin to take responsibility of what we have created now, but also accept the fact that we can change it.
I would agree. I would also agree, though, that, or I would also add as a corollary that most people don't control their own minds.
Mm.
And it's very few people that actually are involved in an active stage of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're not controlling your mind, who is?
Good question, Clif. Do you have the answer?
There is traces, and if one let's look at it historically, a number of our most treasured thinkers, often falling into disrepute, everybody from Thoreau through Buckminster Fuller, have referenced the invisible hand behind the veil.
That's right.
Now, my data is a little bit more specific. I actually did something really cool, I think.
What?
I went to the Council for Foreign Relations.
You did?
Their site. Sorry. When
okay.
I say I went somewhere, I usually am meaning my software.
Okay.
Because I rarely even leave my property here. I'm stuck out in the woods.
Scared the hell out of me on that one.
Time.
Okay.
Okay, so, and also, by the way, you'll find that's common with programmers. We always say, I did this, I did that, because the code I wrote did this. So the code I wrote, I have this particular, let me stop, and people used to say, well, why don't you just sell the program? And it's like, well, I hate to tell you this, but there's 207 executables in Prolog. There's probably about 25,000 lines in Perl. I don't know how many other languages I've got involved in there, and the whole mass of it is probably 60 megabytes. And there's no human interface. If you don't know which predicate to call, it won't run. Because I hate writing error code material. I don't do it for anything I'm going to run myself.
Oh, my gosh.
That having been said,
oh, jeez, yeah.
I have one of these programs. I aimed it at the Council of Foreign Relations.
Okay.
And had it sweep their site to gather all the words.
Okay.
I then have another program that I use to figure out what words are they using to reference themselves. And then I built an emotional profile of what we call descriptors. And so an entity is composed of descriptors. Now I can create an entity, and we can go hunt for it, or we can run the program in serendipitous mode and allow it to just find words and bring them back to us that are emotionally loaded, and then we go ahead and allow the entities to create themselves. Mostly I run in the latter part because it's really cool, it's fun. It's less deterministic, if you will.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, I decided, well, I wanted to build an entity that I'm going to call the powers that be.
Okay, good.
And I could think of no better place to start than the CFR.
Wow.
And I also included the Federal Reserve, but they were too boring to even include, really, but in a few of the other places.
Okay.
So I have an entity that's the powers that be, and it is the spookiest thing I've ever seen. And I say spooky because it brings back weird associations like this dreadlocked fellow, which, you know, this is, again, maybe this is a bad interpretation on my part. A couple of months back, in one of the runs, it's probably Alta 405 or 605, done a few months back, March or so, we started doing the powers that be entity. And we came up with this weird thing where this woman, blind in both eyes, lame in both legs, was directing her blooded companion, a dread man, not dreaded, a dread man, that is to say a man with dreadlocks.
Oh, okay.
To move about the planet in response to or in some way dealing with, interacting with the powers that be. And curiously, we had him walking about London.
Oh my gosh.
Now, was that a bad interpretation? Probably.
Wow.
In hindsight, it probably was.
Oh, Clif, my.
But is that telling us that the attacks against London are not against London and not against the Londoners, but are against the powers that be? Is it telling us that there's an interfactional war going on?
That's pretty heavy stuff.
That's why I say it's. You know, I won't go into the language, but it was very frightening.
Oh my heavens! Wow. Now let's approach that for a minute. Do you think it was an attack on the powers that be, or could it have been an attack by the powers that be?
Your interpretation is as good as mine.
So we really don't know, do we?
No. And of course, successful conspiracies you never hear about. And history is nothing except the tabulation of failed conspiracies.
That's exactly right. Absolutely right. In running that webbot more, or going back and going over it even in retrospect, can you begin to get deeper meanings of the words that were used back then? I mean, does it work in clarifying some of the let's say the predictions that you came up with, like the one we just talked about? Can you go back and
probably could, Peter,
yeah, okay.
But I have a real problem in the sense that I'm basically pretty poor, and I don't have the resources to hold the data, because bear in mind our 60 million reads is on the orders of gigabytes of data coming in, really. Because when I say 2,048 bytes, that's really not the sum of it all. We bring back thousands of bytes on each read and then throw away even more thousands. Actually, it's tens of millions of reads that we get and throw away. So I never save the data from one run to the next. I do the report and then I get it off, clear it off the machine to go on to the next one.
Oh my gosh.
I save summations and notes to myself and so on.
Jeez.
But the data changes so fast as well that my ability to go back under the circumstances I determined some time back would be very limited. So I just wanted to do it at a broad level to kind of refine. I can also tell you, though, just along on this dreaded companion deal, the dread companion is now walking the southeast.
Southeast of where?
U.S.
And I said something in the southeastern part was
correct, and I was just going to wait until the opportune moment to bring this up, but indeed, and we saw that the dread companion was directed to London. He walked about London. The lexicon describes him as wide as he is big, or as tall, so apparently a very robust individual with dreadlocks.
Oh, this is a single individual, or just?
Well, I don't. That's how I'm interpreting it, based on the emotional values we've got.
Okay,
maybe it's an emotional personification of dread that the powers that be have. I don't know. Again, it's my interpretation is as literal as I can get, as actual as I can get, because of the Sumatra earthquake. Let me divert for a second and say that all of last year's runs kept coming up with bad water. 300,000 people affected, people being knocked back to a previous age.
Wow.
More bad water, more bad water, more bad water. And then finally, sometime around November, we get this thing where I interpreted it as it came in as electrified water. So I said, a storm. Big storm, big emotional release, but a storm.
Yeah.
Well, within the same cross-linked data set with electrified water was force-driven wave.
That actually came up?
It's in the same data set. Bear in mind that I go and get a word and it says electricity. Electricity is related to force, it's related to energy, and so on, so I could have used any of those words. So I could have said energetic water, which would have been closer than storm. But the words that drove me into interpreting it as storm was electrified water. And really it was trying to tell me force-driven wave. Because within the water set also is wave, wavelet, river, stream, etc.
Yeah, right. Holy cow.
So you see how it works, right? I miss a lot. I don't figure I'm more than 40% accurate in the precision.
But
a lot of people give me much more credit than that. But
only in the interpretation are you not more accurate. But the information is there. And the information, as far as what I know and have seen, Clif, the information is accurate.
I thank you for your kind words. I'm a little bit harsher on myself. You'll note from my first name that it's not soft and cuddly. And I apply the same standards to myself because I've got to be intellectually honest about it.
Well, okay. All right.
Now, let's divert back to our dread companion here.
Yes,
and I'll tell you some of the words that have shown up.
Okay.
The dread companion and the woman, their relationship is interesting because the woman is the one directing it all. I get the impression from all of this that she's down south of the United States, outside the United States in some way, and she directs this guy because she can't move. And because she's on crutches, lame in both legs, and she's also blind, so he's sort of her eyes and her mobility. And the words we get with their relationship are not good. there's a lot of words suggesting that they're blooded because they've both killed in defense of each other and in other instances. And that's their relationship, and that's the bond that is formed between these two individuals. On the whole, though, I don't find them to be evil or reprehensible individuals. There was the circumstances that presented itself that led to that interpretation, right? So I'm saying this as though these are actual individuals because that's the way the data presents itself, but it could be interpreted other ways. In any event, though, the blind and both-eyed woman directed the dread companion to go to London. Mission? We don't know. And then, shortly thereafter, I think it was the next report, directed the individual to the southeast of the United States.
And that's what's happening right now, we think.
Correct. Now, also bear in mind that our geographic references are, in the main, fantastically huge, and therefore meaningless. I might get back 20 million references in any given run to places in the United States. So
Okay.
which one do I pick as being meaningful or significant?
Yeah, okay.
So generally what we do is we try and cluster other emotional values to pick out broad geographic references. And occasionally, like in the 9/11 one, we did pick up the links to Vegas.
To Las Vegas.
Correct. We knew that at the time, and there were some other details that are sort of vaguely coming back. Bear in mind that I have a limited memory space. I try not to remember these after the interpretation because my problem is the following. With the cross-link, take the electrified water, for instance,
Okay, yeah.
which I interpreted as a storm.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually describing the situation we'd have with a tsunami. But our problem is that I was probably presented with on the order of 11 or 12,000 words from which to choose. I can't present them all. So I'm very careful with the geographic references because I don't want to pander to fear.
If you had, let's say, an exorbitant amount of money, or let's say whatever was needed, whatever amount of money was needed for you to, and I'm not sure what that to is, except possibly one application would be to save all the data that you pick up in every run. Would it be worthwhile to have that information in retrospect?
Not to me.
Really? Okay.
My view of this is somewhat more calloused, in the sense that it might be meaningful if we thought things would persist in a general sense for, say, 30 or 40 or 50 or 80 years or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing that as a realistic prognostication. I have to narrow what is important. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, it does. Sure it does, yeah.
So I need to be as future-focused as possible and just let the past be.
Or would it be worthwhile for somebody else down line to come along after you, Cliff, and go back over and recheck the same information, again in retrospect, to see how much sharper the predictions could come?
Certainly. And I've offered to sell it to any number of organizations that would have the capacity to do so, including the CIA.
And they weren't interested?
Oh, I'm a nut job. No question, Guy. And organization mind just doesn't deal with the nonlinear.
Okay, I can understand that quite a bit. Just knowing how they do work, and yes, I can appreciate what you're saying very, very strongly. I can appreciate it, but one of the reasons might also be is because they may be afraid that what is coming out of your runs may really point the finger at the people who might be behind all this stuff.
Then you're getting into intent, and that's an area I leave alone, because I can only speculate and guess. And I would certainly say that on an individual human level, wouldn't surprise me, wouldn't be shocked by it.
Yeah. And yet, there's a lot of indications out there that point to just that, isn't it?
There is indeed.
Is
much in the way of actual